With just about a day left of the current Deadly Assault rotation, we'll be saying goodbye to Pompey for a very long time. With how many of the recent Deadly Assault fights have panned out, Pompey is a breath of fresh air in terms of consistency. So to honor what is arguably one of the most enjoyable fights in this game before its departure, let's go through the Pompey skip. For those that aren't aware of what it is, it's a technique that allows you to go the entire fight without getting a single invulnerability phase from Pompey. Many seem to think that this must make the fight more obnoxious to grind, with the boss randomly teleporting, or with specific attacks being required by RNG to get good runs. But I'm here to tell you that it isn't like that at all. In fact, the Pompey skip might just make this fight even more consistent than before, where it's your execution and understanding of the game's mechanics that truly dictates what happens. Learning the skip will do more than help you score higher. It can help make runs be more stable and easier to plan around. The skip isn't something you can practice in Hollow Zero or Notorious Hunt. It's Deadly Assault only and Notorious Pompey only. This is because it rides on weakening stacks, which make up the stage buff for the fight. When the agent hits the boss enemy with a defensive assist or chain attack, they apply one stack of weakening to the target. For each stack of weakening on the target, agent crit damage is increased by 10%. This is great and all and a significant buff to crit teams, but all that is just a stat stick. Helpful, but not critical. What we're interested in is the second half of the stage buff. When the boss enemy has 4 stacks of weakening, defensive assist will deflect the boss enemy's attack, causing a stagger effect. Normally, when bosses attack, they won't recoil when parried. The attack will just go through and the boss will keep doing what it's doing. With 4 weakening stacks though, a stagger effect is inflicted, so for as long as you're able to maintain 4 stacks, Pompey will continue to stagger after every move, looping attack after attack and being unable to fight back. But the game isn't particularly descriptive of weakening. Is there a duration to it? Does it get refreshed? Is there a maximum limit? What's actually going on here? So to break it down, weakening is a debuff with a relatively short duration, lasting only 20 seconds. You can see the duration of the debuff in the effect details tab. Unlike most effects in the game, the UI makes this easy to track, as it has its own icon visible under Pompey's health bar, with a number of stacks being shown. Getting multiple defensive assists on one move can build multiple stacks, but chain attacks with multi-hits will still only count as one. Whenever you build a stack, that does not refresh the duration of the buff. You know the classic ZZZ, the duration of each stack is calculated separately? That's the gimmick. The timer tracks the earliest instance, so once it runs out, it will fill back up again to the remaining time on the next shortest stack. The maximum stack count is 4, so once that limit is reached, any new stacks will supersede the ones with the shortest duration. The Pompey skip is all about maintaining these stacks. 4 stacks up, you get staggered and can't go invulnerable. But as soon as the stack drops to 3, you no longer get a stagger, and that means Pompey is going to go invulnerable doing the infamous donut attack. Thankfully, by baiting his light attack, you can keep refreshing stacks over and over, buying time to build resources for out-of-stun chains and locking him down. Before we go through why the slide attack is a big deal, let's build an understanding of how Pompey's moveset works. His attacks are surprisingly scripted. The opener is relatively fixed, always being the same, determined by distance. If you're far when he's due to begin his attack sequence, like from jumping back with Evelyn basics, he will leap. Otherwise, he does a slam. Regardless of what he opens with, he will always follow with an explosion into an onslaught, which ends on an attack that has him hop backwards. And this is important as it can help us manipulate his position, which will come in handy later. After he's done with this opener, he will either go into a blocking stance or a slide attack, with which one he uses being partially influenced by how far away you are. After which, he will randomly go between moves as it suits him. All of this changes when you've gone past around 16,000 score. This is when Pompey will look to initiate his invulnerability phase, and this restricts his moveset. From that point on, he will execute one of 2 actions: a slide attack or a slam attack. Like his leap attack at the start, this is determined by distance, but instead of it being just about Pompey's distance relative to the player, it is Pompey's distance relative to the center of the stage. You may have heard people talk about the shadow area, and this is what it's referring to. If he's at the shadow area, that means he's far away enough so as to go into the slide attack. The shadow is a guide, much like the yellow stripes that you see on the ground on the sides of the stage. If Pompey is out of the center and within these areas, be it in the shadow or beyond the stripes, he is going to do a slide attack and try to move inwards. This is why the little hop back at the start is so handy, because with it, we can more or less control where Pompey will be, and set him up to be in the right place for when the stun begins. That is, until you have Pompey perfectly positioned, yet he spontaneously teleports and goes invulnerable, with you having seemingly no control whatsoever. But you do have control. It's all about orientation. The original video gave a map and explained that depending on where Pompey was facing, he had a chance of going into the slide attack versus teleporting out, with certain areas being danger zones. But I'm not sure that's quite right. For example, it says that facing west or northwest is mostly safe, but from my experiments that wasn't the case. If he was facing west, he often teleported. Likewise, he could be facing southeast and still go into an attack rather than teleport. Same with facing east. Rather than 100% not safe, he would rarely if ever teleport depending on where he was. And depending on where he was is the key here. There may be some nuance lost in translation that I'm certain to have missed from the original video, so no fault to them. But what has been my experience is that it doesn't matter if he's facing north, south, east, west. What matters is where he's facing relative to the center of the arena. If Pompey is facing outwards, he will teleport. If Pompey is facing inwards, so to the center, he's going to try and get back to it by using a slide attack. And if he's already at the center, he'll go into a slam. It isn't exact, he can still face outwards, yes, even in the original graph's 100% danger zones, and quickly turn around, then go into an attack rather than teleport. Likewise, he can be facing inwards and still go into an instant teleport. On the aggregate though, if he's facing out, you go without. And if he's facing in, you win. He'll then repeat moves until he's either stunned, you miss a parry, or weakening stacks are no longer maxed, in which case he isn't interrupted and goes invulnerable. It doesn't matter if it's after a slam or a slide, being just one weakening stack short will mean no interrupt, and that almost always leads to the invulnerability phase. If it was a slide, he may sometimes go into a slam before going invulnerable, but I wouldn't count on it, as it seemed partially related to his position in the stage. But there's more reasons to want to lock Pompey into slide attacks. There is a much longer recovery animation on the slide if there's no stagger, which can buy you precious time. It also has a faster startup than the slam, which is a pretty big deal for routing. Too often you find yourself just barely getting parries in time to maintain full stacks. If Pompey does a slower slam attack instead, then you likely run out of stacks just before getting hit, which can end a run. Another thing that can end a run is Pompey's self-repositioning. You might have noticed that Pompey may be facing one direction, but he attacks in another. He will often turn to face us left, so usually our right, before executing the slide attack. Once he begins chaining slide attacks, he will not face you between them. He will either turn slightly again or retain the same direction. This is a problem because that both changes where he's facing and where he is. It means that Pompey can be facing the center, so that's safe, and he performs a slide attack. But he will inch forwards with every attack, which changes his position. And if he turns slightly before the attack, that changes where he's facing relative to the center. So now he's moved to a place where he's facing outwards, which means he won't go into another attack and just teleport. The turns aren't particularly large, so they're not usually a problem, and if you know they can happen, it's something that you can account for. And he often won't turn, in which case you're safe, as he will face the center and therefore will always move towards it. But try to have him look in a direction that accommodates both. I haven't fully worked out what causes the turn to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's just buggy AI given how strange Pompey's targeting decisions can be. Maybe it's something to do with proximity, but I haven't figured it out yet. There is one thing where proximity certainly does matter for, whether or not he slams. And that's because even after 16,000 score, and even if Pompey is in the right position and facing the right direction, he will not do the slide attack if the player isn't close. So be careful with Evelyn's attacks moving her too far backwards, as, like the leap on the opener, that may lead to a slam when he should be going into a slide. Now that we understand what we need to do, it's about time to figure out how to do it. After all, how are you meant to dictate where Pompey is looking to? For that, we need to talk about the front and back attacks, namely how they might betray your expectations. You might be familiar with Steel Cushion, an attack of engine that increases damage by 25%, but only when hitting enemies from behind. The game is very simple with what's considered front and back. Imagine a line going right across the enemy. Anything landing within the 180 degrees in front is a front attack. Take what's literally a single step to the side, and since you're now within the 180 degrees behind, all those attacks are now considered back attacks. The important thing to note is that what determines the direction of the attack isn't where the player character is, but where the attack comes from. Evelyn's basic 3 is doing 3,295 damage when attacking from the back, but that increases to 4,118 when attacking from the front, a 25 increase as expected from Steel Cushion, but in reverse. This is because her basic 3 is thrown out behind the enemy, so a front attack becomes a back attack and vice versa. This is the exact same system that dictates an enemy's orientation. When you use an attack, if the direction that the attack comes from is the front, then the enemy will turn to face the direction of the attack. However, if the attack is coming from the back, then the enemy will face the complete opposite direction of the attack. So it can be right beside the enemy and they will turn to face you. Or be just a single step further and they will instead turn away from you. Front attack, back attack. And this is a really big deal, because remember, whether something is considered a front or back attack is determined by the direction in which the attack comes from and not the player's position. This can make reorientation really difficult with some characters. Fufu's Aftershock Chain will trigger a reorientation, but since it's coming from a different direction from where your active character is, that can completely mess things up. This is even the case with Evelyn. Use a chain attack from far and you notice that enemies bounce around facing all different kinds of directions. But then moving close and use a chain attack and there is no bouncing, as in this case, all attacks are coming from the back and realigning the enemy to face opposite their direction. And to complicate things further, not all attacks lead to a change in orientation. On training mode, you find that elites, when stunned, turn around freely, like with Lighter Special. This might lead you to think that it's related to heavy attacks, but if you go against boss level enemies, like Pompey, that won't be the case. No matter how many specials Lighter uses, the boss won't move. Use an EX special though, and suddenly it works. Zhu Yuan's Quick Assist causes no orientation change. It doesn't even tickle bosses. But Hugo's Quick Assist does, despite neither character having element weakness match and both being finishers and heavy attacks. The difference between these is their interrupt level. Use Lighter special on a Hearty, a regular elite enemy, and there's no change to them when out of stun. The same is true if you use Zhu Yuan's Quick Assists. But then go into Hugo, and it works. These minute differences in interrupt levels really matter. The low-powered phase of Orphe's Heat Charge may not match its high-powered phase in terms of interrupt level. In stun though, no problem, as it will immediately cause an orientation change. Do be aware that not every enemy can be redirected. Big robots, even the mobile ones like God and MK2, will retain their direction. As far as it matters for Pompey, Evelyn's Quick Assists and chain attacks are enough to cause orientation changes, so making use of them is important. And luckily for us, there are ways to increase the interrupt levels of skills. When a chain is triggered, enemies will flinch, so even attacks that have low interrupt levels will lead to a reorientation. This can be front or back. As with any attack, the chain trigger functions as an elevation of the interrupt level. This can be applied more broadly too. When anomalies with a weakness match are triggered, bosses will be interrupted and reoriented even out of stun. So naturally, it also works just fine if triggered in stun. However, anomalies that an enemy is neutral or resistant to will not have this effect, even in stun. There are also move-specific mechanics that can modify how orientation changes are processed, allowing you to turn an enemy facing away from you to facing towards you. Evelyn's EX special, for example, causes enemies to turn during the wraparound portion of the attack, turning most of them 90 degrees clockwise. That doesn't make it exempt from reorientation rules. If Evelyn detonates the EX, that will trigger the standard behavior. Enemies will face forwards even after turning almost 90 degrees if it lands from the front. Or if it ends up landing behind due to bad positioning when the attack begins, cause enemies to turn fully backwards. It's a really big deal when using Astra's Automate. If you go into Evelyn's EX after a chain, how fast you swap to Astra matters a lot. If you do it fast, you can get it before the detonation, with Evelyn attacking Pompey at a slight angle with the chain. If you do it slow, then the detonation will reset Pompey's orientation, which is usually going to be the front, but not always, so keep that in mind. Honestly, just be careful of the move in general. Even without detonation, if you use it when Pompey's facing you already, you may end up turning him away when other characters, like Lighter, come in. Not that it's a bad thing, as you can do this intentionally if you want to turn Pompey a full 180 degrees. It is, however, a little inconsistent. Sometimes Evelyn's EX special won't work as expected. This is because the very first hit of the attack is subject to standard reorientation rules. Depending on the size of the enemy, whether they're flinching or have any modifications to their hurt box, the first hit of the EX can be offset, causing an instant reorientation. The rest of the move then functions as normal, but that may end up leaving you with no change. On smaller bodied enemies, they may spin counterclockwise or even do full 360 turns. On Pompey, this can manifest itself as a full 180 degree turn, an immediate 90 degree shift, followed by the usual EX hits. This seems to be very rare, but it can happen, so try to adapt to it. The last thing worth covering is how, contrary to what you might expect, out-of-stun interrupts are not always a good thing. Burn or Mindscapes, like Evelyn's M2, can interrupt Pompey. You'd think that'd be good, as it can buy you time to stun. In isolation though, it's a problem, as the route works in such a way that you're reliant on both constant parries and at least one out-of-stun chain, be it from Evelyn or Jafufu, to maintain weakness stacks. Interrupts from Burn or Mindscapes mean fewer attacks and fewer parry opportunities, resulting in weakness dropping off. So if you don't stun very quickly after, it can end runs. The borrow from Yoji's clear, you might notice that he dash cancels out of Evelyn's enhanced basics, getting the burn to sync up with assist follow-ups and the recall from weakness stacks instead. Take a closer look at the time left on the weakness debuff, and is it any wonder? Unlike M0 runs that can dash cancel burn, Mindscape runs don't have a way to disable the higher interrupt level on attacks. That doesn't make them bad though, quite the opposite. It can open up entirely new routes. By combining burn anomalies, high interrupt level skills, and stunner ultimates, it's possible to rely on Pompey's delayed teleportation from slide attacks to skip the invulnerability phases without relying on weakness stacks. With a P3 Kaleido engine, even if Lighter's M1 extension and stun duration, a hastily put together M2 Evelyn run was ending the 4th stun with 20 seconds left and still Lighter's ultimate in the tank. With optimizations on Lighter's signature, I could see it ending with 30 seconds left, which would allow you to hit 5 stuns with enough time to fit in chains and Evelyn's ultimate. And if you are interested in these crazy Mindscape runs, Evelyn is currently on Banner. Rather than paying full price for your monochromes though, why not get 20% extra? Anything that you buy on the Epic Game Store will refund 20% of your purchase in Epic Reward Funds up until January 8th. So if you spend $100 in Zenless Zone Zero, or any other game for that matter, that's $20 back, which you can spend again on Zenless or any other game in the Epic Game Store. It's also a global promotion and not region restricted. So if you can access the Epic Game Store, you're eligible, even when using foreign currencies. If you do plan on buying games or topping up there, do use the creator code LIN-0 when you check out. You don't need this code to get 20% back, but it does go a long way at helping me out, as in connection with Epic Games Supported Creator Program, I may receive payouts from your in-game purchases. Again, that's LIN-0. With that, we've gone through everything you need to know to Pompey skip. There are still plenty of routing optimizations that we could go over, but rather than taking you through them, let me point you to Yoji. Big thanks to him who had the patience to share his footage and take me through it, as well as explaining the decisions he took on the runs. It was when we were going through the failed runs that got me to start thinking about the specifics and how one could make them more consistent. The result of that rabbit hole is this video, so we wouldn't be here without him. He's also got an Evelyn run that flawlessly executes the Pompey skip, so why not check him out? Few people can match his level of skill. There's always something to learn from his content. Second, KKXWHA, who actually posted about the Pompey skip on the ZZZ discussion Reddit. They did a great job at bringing the tech to light, as well as summarizing and translating the contents of the Billy video that first discussed this. They seem to frequently act as a bridge between the cool things in the CM community and the West, even with neat artsy stuff, which is very much appreciated. And lastly, Lulululubao, who had the original Pompey skip run and was the first to really get a grasp of how to begin manipulating attacks on the fight. If not for his run and the breakdown of it, we'd be none the wiser. Although ZZZ is a single-player game, the development and dissemination of new discoveries, be them techs or routes, is often the result of community effort, where everyone is adding and contributing in their own way. I hope with this, I've managed to build upon the community's understanding and, who knows, maybe inspire some to go and try to skip or hunt for their own techs. If you've enjoyed the content, why not like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay in the loop for more? I've got more videos coming. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.